Welcome to the first event in our summer programme, Change, Challenge and Opportunity, a series of events that will explore the role of sustainability and ESG factors in shaping business over the next decade. I'm Claire Fraser, Head of Stakeholder Engagement at Emperor. And today's discussion is about leveraging sustainability as a value driver and the opportunities transformation represents to build resilience and future-proof your business. We'll answer the most pressing questions that we get from clients and provide practical advice to help you navigate the path ahead. So why are we having this conversation? Change is everywhere right now, from increasing stakeholder expectations around climate action, social issues and equality, new policies and regulation on technology and low carbon economies, to food and supply chain shortages, the impact of Russia's war in Ukraine and rising inflation. No brand or sector is immune, it's fair to say, and sustainability commitments are now an expectation, not a differentiator. So innovation and new ways of thinking are going to be critical to address current and emerging issues. We promised you expert views from business leaders at the forefront of change, and our panel today includes Mike Barry. Mike is a leader in sustainable change, one of the pioneers of green business in the corporate world. He helped to develop, launch and implement Marks & Spencer's groundbreaking sustainability programme, Plan A. In 10 years, Plan A delivered £750 million of net business benefit. We're also joined by Emily Martin, Director at Lloyds Banking Group. Emily leads on the infrastructure, energy and industrials portfolio from an ESG finance perspective. A large part of Emily's role looks at greening the debt that Lloyds Banking Group finance, whether that's via green loans or sustainability-linked lending. Emily is experienced in structuring energy risk management solutions and is passionate about supporting hard-to-abate sectors in their transition to net zero. We're also joined by David Croft, Global Director of Sustainability, Environment and Human Rights at Reckitt. David is responsible for Reckitt's work on environmental and social sustainability around the world, working with farmers, communities and manufacturers alongside Reckitt's global supply chain and brand teams. David's role encompasses 4 key areas: product stewardship, environmental and supply chain oversight, supply chain standards and human rights, and sustainability communications and engagement. We also have Stephanie Palmer, who's Head of Sustainability at Wienerberger. Stephanie is responsible for the development and implementation of Wienerberger's sustainability strategy in the UK. Through the sustainability strategy, Stephanie is guiding Wienerberger towards the goal of becoming a net zero, nature positive business. She works across multiple departments to help them manage transition risks and identify opportunities to increase resilience. Stephanie was also recognised in ED's 30 Under 30 class of 2020 for her work as a talented sustainability professional. And Lynn Dickinson is Director of Responsible Business at Emperor. Lynn is a BCorp enthusiast, aka a B leader. Lynn has shaped and led 2 agency responsible business programmes and is currently driving Emperor's own responsible business agenda to help embed sustainability and meet the changing needs of our business. So Mike is our moderator for today's discussion. And without further ado, I will hand over to Mike to set the context for us. So why, what and how will ESG factors frame future business strategies, and why is integration important?
Well, thank you. And you're here to hear a brilliant panel. I'm going to be ever so brief in what I have to say now. And I just want to put 3 very brief bullet points into the room. The first is to remind us why we're gathered here at all in a time of Ukraine conflict, pandemics, cost of living crisis across the world. Why should we be worrying about this sustainability thing? Well, let's just remind ourselves the world is heated by 1 degree C already. For all the blandishments and promises at COP26, we're probably heading for 2.5 to 3 degrees of heating by the end of the century, because we're just not going to get that geopolitical partnership between the US, China, Russia, the Middle East that we need to deliver a 2-degree world. So let's be really clear about that. What does that mean in context? Well, 23,000 years ago, the world was on average about 5 to 6 degrees colder. It was the Ice Age in much of Northern Europe, and the north of the UK was under 1,000 metres of ice. That's 5 degrees colder. Think what 3 degrees hotter might mean for 8 to 9 billion people squeezed onto the planet today. So what do we do? And the first is transformational mindsets. That's critical to me. we've grown up in a paradigm. I've grown up in a paradigm where it's about making existing business models less bad. 1% less energy use, 2% less plastic, 3% more human rights audits each year. It's simply not enough to keep up with the crisis I've just defined. We have to think in a transformational mindset. And that means that a diesel car company needs to become an electric car company. A meat-based business might need to become a plant-based one in the future. It is that much of a transformation we need, and it needs to happen quickly. And my third bullet point is what about scale? As much as I love what Lloyds are doing, the Reckitt are doing, the Unilever are doing, they are small in number relative to the global economy. We need millions of companies following the lead of these inspiring leaders. So how do we get scale? And it's encouraging to see this sort of embracement of this word scope 3 action, ability of businesses, big businesses, to work with tens of thousands of suppliers to support them on the journey, for banks, financial institutions to work with hundreds of thousands of companies that they bank, they finance. So the ability to bring scope 3 into our thinking and actions is critical. And my final thing is, how do you integrate all of that into your big, busy business against all of this difficult short-term backdrop I'm talking about? And I just asked 3 fundamental questions of any boardroom. Do you understand why you need to become sustainable? That's strategy. What are all these external drivers that mean you need to transform? The second question is, what do you do to become sustainable? That's your engine room of change. That's your carbon target, your water target, human rights target, your governance to make sure it's delivered, your reporting to make sure you're transparent. And the third question is one that everybody forgets. How do I integrate it into my big, busy business so everybody does it, not just a specialist team in the middle? So how do you make your suppliers, your commercial colleagues, people on the shop floor, your investors, the rest of your sector, come along on the journey with you? So let's keep that in mind. The world is burning. We need to transform. We need to scale this, and we need to integrate it into our business. And on that cheery note, I'm going to bring Emily into the conversation and just ask you to tell us a little bit about your day job and how you're beginning to address these issues and integrate it into your business. Emily, over to you.
Thanks, Mike, and also to Claire for the introductions and setting the scene, and for inviting me here to talk to you all today. It's a great question, and let's start with how it's impacting my role day to day, and then move on to some of the challenges and opportunities. Sustainability and ESG integration is core to my day job, which involves, as Claire said, looking at how a company can embed their sustainability strategy into their financing. So effectively looking at how to green the debt that we finance to incentivise our clients to make the right choices, whether that is via green loans, such as the use of proceeds methodology, i.e. ring-fence lending to a specific green project, or sustainability-linked lending, where KPIs linked to sustainability targets are embedded into debt facilities. And if these metrics are hit, then discounted lending is applied. But beyond my own team, the ESG agenda is core to the whole of Lloyds Banking Group. We've been doing lots in sustainability, as Mike already picked up on, both from our own carbon footprint and commitments here to decarbonise our operations, but also in how we lend to companies, i.e. the emissions that we finance, the scope 3 that Mike just mentioned. And we have publicly committed to halving these by 2030, no small feat. And on top of that, we've upped our clean growth finance initiative to 15 billion, which is effectively a mechanism for us to finance the green transition, largely by these discounted loans. So as the UK's largest financial institution, we rightly feel a big responsibility to the country, and this is demonstrated in our purpose, which is helping Britain prosper, which we've had for a few years, but was reiterated in our new strategy in February, which sets out the key areas of focus for our next chapter. Front and centre of this, of course, is how we support our clients to transition to a greener world, and we're doing it for the right reasons. First and foremost, to protect our planet, and secondly, because it's part of our core purpose and corporate strategy. So as well as incentivising clients to make the right ESG choices via discounted lending, my team are also actively identifying what new green technologies can accelerate that net zero transition and how we can increase our financial support here. One example is we've just completed a hydrogen technology deep dive, and we have identified a dozen projects in the UK where we think we can play a role in possibly financing them. So I've touched on a couple of the challenges, and as Claire said, I run the infrastructure, energy and industrial sector from an ESG finance perspective. So cover a lot of the hardest to decarbonise sectors of compared to any of the other ones. So the transition to a green economy will require vast leaps in energy efficiency, renewable electricity generation, and the creation of these cutting edge technologies, some of which are very, very nascent in their development. And unfortunately, there is no one silver bullet. Just wanting to pick up on another theme that Mike mentioned, and one that's getting a lot of press at the moment, and clearly a very big challenge, is that of supply chains. COVID and the war in Ukraine has really brought this into sharp focus. And I just wanted to quickly zoom in on SMEs and their side of the sustainability story through that supply chain lens. So it's often the SMEs that are the most important in the green transition. These are the ones that are working at the front line to deliver the national projects. They hold the specialist skills that the larger corporates need. However, they are also the firms that often have the least resources to invest in transitioning to a more sustainable footing. And this paradox poses a really major challenge to the UK in its progress and target towards net zero. So the smaller firms lack the resources of many of the larger corporates, but in a nutshell, their help in meeting ambitious emissions targets is absolutely crucial. And just a quick shout out for Lloyds Bank. We did a report called Now to Net Zero, which was researched into 1,000 of these SME clients, not all of ours, and 42% of them believe that it would help reduce cost and waste in their business. Very encouraging. But then on the flip side, 40% don't know what it means for their business, because there are so many obviously competing priorities and the big elephant in the room of the fears over the cost to go green. But actually, by taking sustainable action today, you can reduce your costs in water, electricity and gas, and improve efficiencies in business models. So previously, SMEs thought that it was a big business problem and not one that they had to participate in, but that's just not the case anymore. And just final word on that is a really good example that's taking place at the moment. There are many SMEs with a great business, producing a great product, with a great service, a great price, with a great degree of track record and integrity. But if that client doesn't have a robust sustainability strategy in terms of who they're supplying, especially to some of the larger corporates, they could very quickly get squeezed out of the supply chain. And larger businesses are starting to expect minimum standards from their suppliers around this issue, be that because of the impact on their own ESG credentials via the scope 3 that we're talking about, or because they're concerned about reputational risk. So having your contract taken away is a very real risk and could happen quickly without a lot of notice. So the imperative is now, and doing nothing is just not an option. So very quickly, a couple of other challenges. The perceived conflict between sustainability and business or commercial choices that a company needs to make. This is actually quite nicely tackled by ESG financing, where it supports the company to embed their sustainability strategy into their financing, so often bringing together those two previously siloed departments and ensuring that sustainability runs through all aspects of a business. And I think the last challenge that I face, not quite on a day-to-day basis, but regularly, is that of greenwashing. The sectors that I cover are clearly brown, and some of them there is not the technology in place to decarbonise those immediately. And so there can be a lot of claims of greenwashing from NGOs and the media. And, we want to really support these companies and industries in the hard to abate sectors, especially those that are investing heavily in innovative solutions and are making, all of the reductions that are currently available according to the science. But we do acknowledge that in some instances, we will have to walk away from some of these clients, especially if they don't have credible transition plans or no obvious decarbonising pathway. And I guess here the thing that really counteracts those greenwashing claims, if one of these brown companies is to do a sustainable financing, is around that narrative and the marketing aspect of that sustainable financing. So I've touched on a few of the challenges. I guess one of the other opportunities is the first mover advantage, which in the interest of time, I won't go into, but is relatively self-explanatory. But I do strongly believe that if you can demonstrate credentials and your commitment to your sustainability journey, it will attract more business and investment. So is a win-win. I could talk about many others, but conscious of time, Mike. So we'll leave it there.
Emily, a tour de force. Thank you. Great way to start. And in a moment, I'm going to ask David to come in, but after everybody's had their opening remarks, I'm going to come back to you and ask you about how do you help a typical SME get started on this? Because, you know, it's easy to say you need to sort of embrace this transformation, but where do I practically start the journey? But I'll come back to you on that in a minute. David, if I can invite you into the conversation and just ask you for some opening remarks about the Reckitt journey.
I mean, I look at this not just from a Reckitt journey perspective, but the journey that Mike, you and I have been on for far too many years, that our youthful good looks still keep going. Yeah, I didn't need that sort of laughter from the audience. Thank you for that. That was for me, not you, Mike. From a Reckitt point of view, we've been on a big shift over the last 3 or 4 years to move from what was very clearly a compliance-led agenda in the context of ESG into something that is much more forward-thinking. And when we relaunched the sustainability ambitions that we have back in March of last year, we particularly wanted to be certain that it was a set of sustainability ambitions and activities that supported and underpinned a business strategy. All too often, I think that we see business sustainability strategies and business strategies, and the two things just don't join up. And then you wonder why people don't deliver them at scale or at pace or with the resources that you were talking to, Mike, to drive the change and even to deliver the targets. And in crafting those ambitions for Reckitt last year, I made absolutely certain that it was part and parcel of a core business conversation. And so even when we were at COP last year, when we were talking about climate change, our focus was on the impact that climate change has on people's health, the impact of poor hygiene driven by climate change impacts. And we talked a lot about the sad fact that there was no health day at COP last year, and yet health impacts of climate change are going to affect all of us very, very soon. They're affecting billions of people already, but that conversation hasn't been had. And for Reckitt as a health and hygiene company, it's critical that we tackle climate change in order to make certain that our core business activity grows, but also we help protect people whose lives are being impacted by climate change. And it's a subtle but very important nuance. And I hate to say it, I was at a conference, I was speaking at a conference the other week, and somebody rightly said, sadly, there's been too much focus on polar bears, on dwindling amounts of ice floe. And that's the image we all have. But that doesn't internalize it for people. And our goal is to make certain that we all know that there's a role we can play. And then from a Reckitt point of view, to do our part in combating climate change through design of products, stronger supply chains, how we work with suppliers, but also how we connect with the 20 million households who put our products into their homes every day to help them play a part, as well as protecting their health through better hygiene and so on and so forth. That's a core business conversation. And in doing so, in order to strengthen our approach, I get to leverage a £50 billion organisation rather than perhaps a philanthropic approach or a sustainability compliance approach where people always look at that budget and go, why have I spent that much money? That's the difference. That's the change we've been trying to drive, that it's a core business conversation, because all of the sustainability areas make a difference to core business. I look at the SDGs and think about them as a proxy for thriving communities. And as a fast moving consumer goods company, and believe you me, there's not many faster than Reckitt in this discussion, understanding how you help and enable communities to thrive is about the market now and the market for the future. And so we've shifted the discussion from something that was risk-based, compliance-based, into something that is much more balanced and much more about opportunity. And we see consumers, customers coming to us saying, tell us more about how you're going to make more sustainable products. If we don't do it, we risk losing them. If we do it, there's a huge opportunity, not just through more resilience, but actually through designing products that will better meet people's needs in a low carbon, low water economy and drive change through them. And that's what a significant way that we've changed the dialogue within Reckitt to move the conversation forward. And oftentimes, I think, Mike, we talk about all of this sustainability conversation as a technical issue, as a compliance issue, as a risk issue. One of our business unit presidents said to me not too long ago, I hear all that, David, and it's important, but it's not motivating. the way to motivate people is to give them opportunity to try and create positive change that helps them, but helps further than them. And my strapline for that inside the business is, how do we create impact for the business, but just as importantly, impact through the business to deliver the SDGs on the raft of issues that we're talking about.
David, thank you. So much richness again in there. And again, in a moment, I'll come back to you when we've been around the panel, just to ask you about something I know you've done up in Hull, which I think is a really important part of your operational empire, production and R&D, where you've developed a net zero plan for Hull to make it relevant to the people of Hull, as opposed to the people of the general world. So I'll be back to ask about that one in a moment. But before I do, Stephanie, if I can bring you into the conversation, again, a very different business model from consumer goods and banking. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, everyone. For those of you who aren't familiar with Wienerberger, we're a provider and manufacturer of construction products. We built our business on the manufacturing of ceramic products, so clay bricks, roof tiles, clay blocks. And just as Emily was describing, really, we are one of those hard to abate sectors, because when you're heating clay to over 1,000 degrees, you really need natural gas to be able to do that, and switching fuels is tricky. So yeah, we are at the moment in one of those brown industries, and looking for ways to transform, because if we don't, then there isn't a future for the business. It really is that simple, and that's been a key message to convey to our board and our management team, and they've come around to that. But as as David says there, that's not motivating, is it? You need to help people create the change as well. So over the last couple of years, I've taken the senior leadership team at Wienerberger through a process that looks quite a lot like the scenario forecasting for TFCD, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And we went through a process so that they could really understand why change is necessary. And we took a deep dive into scenarios created by Arup, their for scenarios for 2050. And that enabled our senior leadership team to step into each of those scenarios and really think about, if Wienerberger was going to achieve net zero emissions within that particular scenario, how would they do it? How would the business need to change? And through that process, the senior leadership team got a real close view of what the business could be in the future, what our challenges would be, but also where the opportunities are for growth as well. And out of those, the analysis of our future business in those 4 scenarios, we were able to build a decarbonisation plan that had embedded resilience based on the common actions across each of those scenarios. And that was a really valuable exercise, not only for the outcomes, which were our decarbonisation strategy, our pathway to net zero, but also the learning from the senior leadership team that was gained as part of the process. The knowledge they acquired around climate challenges and how to reduce emissions through multiple ways that were open to us was great. And it also encouraged the team to think about what company Wienerberger could be in the future based on what products or services we could provide, that if you asked how the business would evolve from where we are now, you wouldn't necessarily make those connections, but actually going through that scenario planning exercise enabled the business to do that. So after we'd answered the first of Mike's questions of, do you understand why you need to change and what do you want to do, we're now in the stage of how we integrate it. So that exercise and the development of the decarbonisation roadmap then accumulated in a new sustainability strategy for the company, because we knew that we can't just tackle carbon as a single item, and there are resource scarcity challenges and also the biodiversity loss to tackle as well, and that we needed to bring both our employees and our supply chain and our customers with us as well. So there was a need for a refreshed sustainability strategy for the UK. So we launched that last autumn, and that's been a really good way of providing a roadmap for both our stakeholders internally, but also external stakeholders to understand the pathway that the business is on, what we want to achieve over the next 8 years to 2030, and hopefully give some credibility to the ambitions that we've set for 2030, knowing that there are stepping stones along the way, and we've already started demonstrating that we're able to meet those early ones and meeting some of them early as well. So in terms of opportunities that came out of both that scenario forecasting, but then also the construction of the sustainability strategy, it's prompted us to look at new business models. So as you consider our construction products at the moment, they're very durable. If you are thinking about the circular economy in terms of housing, then it's great because it allows a house to be reused as remortgaged multiple times within its lifespan. They might last 100, 200 years. And so the durability helps with that circularity argument, but at the end of that lifespan, we still don't have an answer for that yet. So that's an area that we're working on, which will lead to new product designs and probably new product categories in time as well. And alongside that, we're also working on the personnel side. So our next big chunk of work is around skills development and training for, first of all, our business, but then we'll also stretch it out to our suppliers as well. So the Institute of Environmental Management, IEMO, released a Green Skills and Jobs report just last month, I believe, and that report provides a really useful framework on how you can provide your various departments around a business with the skills that they need in order to support a net zero transition. And that's a really useful framework that everyone can use to help develop training plans for their team members. And hopefully as we build that capacity internally, it won't just be me and my department supporting the transition. Then we'll be giving our employees the knowledge and the skills that they need to make decisions faster, which will help with business resilience too, enable that transition to hopefully happen in time. And that's really our main challenge now. It's can we move fast enough given the challenges that Mike had explained at the beginning. It looks like we're not on a good trajectory. So as Wienerberger develops, we'll be thinking about how we can mitigate climate change, but also how we can help our customers and ultimately citizens adapt to the changing climate as well through the construction products and services that we provide.
Stephanie, thank you. And listening to you, I was really struck by how difficult decarbonisation is for you at the heavy end of manufacturing. And it reminded me of the Steel Zero initiative that's just been launched, where those that use steel, the Volvos and the Orsteds, are working to create a market demand for low carbon steel. So I'm going to come back to you in a moment and just ask about how we start to create a demand pull from your clients that's making it easier for you to transition because they're sending a really clear signal to say we want this and we'll work with you to get it. But I'll come back to that in a minute. Lynn, if we can come to you, I mean, again, a different model again, Emperor, service-led management consultancy in effect. Just tell me as well, tell us about how you're integrating sustainability into your proposition and how you're working with your clients in a different way.
That's a really interesting, I'm going to try and answer it as well with a couple of different hats as well, the kind of Emperor hat and also the kind of BCorp leader hat as well, which, and of course they, one story naturally goes into the next one. But obviously for us as that strategic corporate communications agency helping clients develop sustainability strategy and communications, it's absolutely key that we know our stuff, and it's increasingly important that we are taking action. Our clients are increasingly demanding it, and certainly the clients that we want to have are increasingly demanding it. And of course, we're an employee-owned business, and our partners care deeply about different sustainability topics as well. So it's absolutely key and fundamental to our own business resilience, and sustainability is a thread through our operations, how we operate, our ways of working, and also increasingly into how we're going to be innovating services in the future. It's also, as David talked about, core to our business strategy, which is about focused growth, operational excellence and talented people. Responsible business underpins and overarches all of that, which I think takes us into some of those aspects around the challenges and the day-to-day, creating this idea of aspiring to be a B Corp, and the idea behind the B Corp movement, that one of shared value. It's not shared value, and being a responsible business isn't an add-on or a separate entity. It's very much about embedding responsible business practices into core business activities and making them more impactful, and that is, you know, you asked me and everyone about the challenges. You know, that challenge of embedding into the business is certainly a considerable one. It takes time and patience to kind of reach into the business and help us do things in a different way in order to have a bigger and a better impact. So and I think also just like to say something a little bit about, Emily mentioned, you know, the challenge of SMEs, smaller businesses with fewer resources. So there are 5.6 million SMEs in the UK, and we all need to be pointed towards net zero and a more sustainable economy. So it just shows that, you know, we are part of that movement, and to getting started can also feel quite daunting. So to really be able to focus and prioritize is also really important for any business. To start measuring is kind of important, kind of first step. We've talked about efficiencies, you know, to start measuring, to be able to demonstrate those efficiencies is important. But of course, once you start gathering data, it gives you the insights that you need to innovate. So it's that journey that you go on as you become more mature with your journey. And just thinking in terms of kind of being a B leader, we have seen this incredible interest in the B Corp movement over the last 2 years. It took 15 years for the B Corp movement to become 5,000 businesses big. And in 2021, they actually received, B Corp actually received 6,000 submissions for certification. So that kind of shows the increased interest in that movement. And I think, you know, increasingly it goes to, again, some of the things that Emily was talking to earlier, which is that the B Corp has the stats that tells them that B Corps attract investment, secure investment, sometimes at a reduced rate. You know, the B Corps attract and retain diverse people, a more diverse workforce, which leads to a more innovative mindset. B Corps are shown to deliver growth faster than other SMEs. And interestingly, B Corps say that they innovate, you know, at a much greater rate than other SMEs as well. So it's demonstrating that having that kind of sustainability built into your mindset unlocks value and innovation, opens your eyes to those areas and those opportunities that can be seized. So obviously we're big fans of that movement, and of course we're talking with our clients about this all of the time.
Thank you, Lynn. And again, in a moment, I'm going to come back to you just to get a reflection on this huge opportunity now from the B Corp movement for you to sell to them because you're a B Corp company. Brilliant. But do you think in the future B Corp companies will have to reject potential clients because they just don't share the same values as them? So I'm going to come back in a moment on that. But before I do, I want to just sort of hook back round to Emily. And we just sort of started talking about, brilliant, you've convinced me as an SME that banks with Lloyds that I do need to change. Now what do I do? Where do I start?
Great question. So we know the imperative is there. And as I outlined at the start, you know, the right ESG credentials is now a license to trade. But, you know, how do you get started? It's much easier said than done. So there is a lot of support out there for SMEs on their road to net zero. And I'm just going to lean on the main outputs from that Now to Net Zero report, which I mentioned that we had commissioned for 1,000 of our, not just our clients, sorry, but 1,000 SME clients. And one of the outputs of that was a 5-step plan, which was a practical guide, which is the important word there for SMEs, that can be applied, obviously to other companies as well. But I would encourage anyone to read it if they haven't already. It's on our website, and it's these 5 steps look at how to get started. In it, there's a clean growth audit checklist. It then moves on to some short-term wins, so recycling, reducing energy consumption, changing lighting to LED, a lot of things that, the listeners now will recognise that we're all trying to do more of at home. Then it went on to look at some of the propositions that we're developing to help measure, something that Lynn just mentioned, very important. How do we actually measure the carbon footprint? There's a green buildings tool that we offer our clients, and a carbon calculator. That is just being piloted in our SME client base at the moment, but will hopefully be available to the wider SME world at the end of this year. And lastly, we've done a series of real life case studies via our sustainability voices, or listen to others, which I think can be found on social media. And I think the key point there for me on that last point is that this is about collaboration, sharing best practices so that we can really accelerate our path to net zero. Peer collaboration is going to be really, really important, and we need to be clear on the areas that we can compete. So if we're making electric trucks, do not compete on the challenges of getting those raw materials out of the ground or the human rights aspects. Just looping back to the discussion earlier around supply chain, we did a transaction, it's in the public domain, where we were ESG coordinator with Weights, so a fellow construction company there for Stephanie, and it ties in nicely with how companies can influence their supply chain to make sustainable commitments, because the first KPI, key performance indicator, was that 35% of Weights' top 200 suppliers have to have science-based targets approved by December 2024. That's obviously linked to scope 3 emissions, and I think that is going to be a target that we see more and more, and is kind of the carrot and the stick, incentivizing these smaller companies to ensure that they do align and have their sustainability strategies in order. So I think sharing information on best practices along the supply chain is kind of the first obvious step. But you're absolutely right, Mike. The imperative is there, and it's just about getting started.
Emily, thank you. And I would say to everybody on the call, please, if you've got any questions, drop them into the chat, and Claire will bring them to our attention, and we'll do our best to answer. So, David, if I can just pop across to you now. I mean, again, I threw into the pond net zero Hull. You're making it real, relevant to real people and real communities. Just share a little bit of learning from that.
Yeah, Mike, I was speaking at the CBI this morning about exactly this. And, as we try and create scale, greater momentum, faster progress towards net zero, how you collaborate up and down a supply chain from a business point of view is clearly important. But what we're also seeing, and I'm sure the people on today are seeing it as well, is that that's still a very siloed approach. You need to think about how can you collaborate with your peers, but also cross-sector. The programme at Hull is particularly important, not just for Reckitt, who's been in Hull for the better part of 200 years. It's the origin of the Dettol business. It's where Isaac Reckitt set up the business 200 years ago. But also because the Humber side and the Humber region is 37% of the UK's total carbon emissions. So if we don't sort out Hull and the Humber side region, then we're not going to hit the government's targets for this country as a whole. What OES Net Zero Hull is all about is that cross-sector collaboration. So it's business, it's about 70 different organisations beyond the private sector. The health service, the NHS, the university hospital there, the council, housing associations, schools, universities, all working together to build learning, to build capacity, but also having identified their own targets for net zero, building collective action plans that work through it. And that's why you see the hospital, yes, generating solar electric power. You'd expect that's a relatively easy one. But they also know that a bigger part of their emissions is how do they change away or find different anaesthesia gases. And one bottle of that anaesthesia gas is worth about 440 tonnes of coal emissions. that's when you really start to accelerate change, when you start to think about how you work and not just your energy supply. The council has invested more than 100 million, some of that on capex issues, supply issues and opportunities, EVs, even EV infrastructures, but a lot of it also for developing low carbon domestic power. They're also working with us, or more I should say, we're working with them on bringing the skills base forward. How do we work with teenagers to start to develop greater awareness of climate change, build it into educational programs, and then work it through so that there's actually a growth opportunity in terms of the new jobs that are being created in the Humber region, which is a hotspot for the hydrogen sector and a whole host of other new renewable approaches. And what we're seeing is much faster progress because of this collaboration. I mean, I was asked a question this morning about, because the council is involved, does it help with better coordination on things like planning? And the answer is yes, it does. And you need to have that network and that collaboration from those different sectors to build your action plan, to support your action plan, but to help you progress through the action plans that we all are developing. And what I saw loud and clear at COP last year is it's no longer enough just to have a good target. It's actually no longer enough just to have an action plan that sits with that target. What you now have to do is be transparently reporting about how much progress you are making along that action plan and whether you're more or less on track or whatever. And what we see through Hull is a collective approach where everybody's action plans are coordinating together, creating more opportunity, and that creates the connection that can access funds, that can build networks, that can open up the opportunities for infrastructure development that everybody then benefits from. And that's why it's also really important from the levelling up conversation as well. It's not just about a climate change conversation, it's about a total change conversation.
David, brilliant. And again, you're starting to join so many different dots there, which I'll come back to. And I'll say to all the panelists, when we've done this round of questions and any questions from the floor, I'm going to just pick up on two themes to finish off with you. One is the use of digital tools to help you become more sustainable more quickly, more efficiently. And the second is this skills thing. How do you make sure that your colleagues beyond the immediacy of the sustainability team are doing it as part of their day job? I'll come back to that. Because Stephanie, I want to come back to you again, this concept of Steel Zero, those that buy from you, how are they helping make the market for more sustainable products?
Yeah, okay. So creating a strong pull from customers is obviously really key if we're going to put products or services in the market. We want them to be welcomed with open arms. I'm not sure if it's the same in other industries, but in construction that can be really difficult. First of all, getting the product to market is really tough because there are so many testing regimes that actually take a long time that we need to go through, and there's good reason for that based on what's happened with cladding materials. But bringing new products to market, one for the testing and two for the mortgage and insurance implications can be really tricky as well, because if you're using non-standard construction materials, then you're less likely to be able to get building insurance, or at least it's more difficult too. So there's a couple of barriers for people actually wanting to try new products for us if we can get them to market. But we can create a pool amongst customers by providing with the information that they need about those products and services and what the life cycle impact is, and demonstrate how that's an improvement on their existing materials that they're using. So in construction, the main way to do that is through using an environmental product declaration, which says it provides the whole life impact of a product on a range of environmental indicators, including global warming potential. So if you're able to use those effectively and build them up to a system, either a wall or a roof or a landscape, whatever element you're working on, then it can be really powerful. But choosing the right elements of the EPD to pull out and put into your modelling system and using it in the right combination with other materials can be really, really difficult. And so there's a lot to do there around educating customers and actually helping them, showing them what the impact is if it's too difficult for them to do themselves.
Very clear. And again, it is difficult, but we've got to create that marketplace pull, whether it's for consumer goods out to consumers or B2B. We've got to get those marketplaces pulling as well as you pushing up the hill as well. Without that, it's a struggle. Lynn, I'm just going to come across to you now and just this question about B Corps. Again, you've got a rapidly growing marketplace that you as an ethical business can sell to another ethical business. But where do you have to draw the line, do you think, as a B Corp company that's saying, that's beyond the pale, I just can't afford to be selling services to a potentially lucrative client, and I'm going to walk away from that job? Do you think that's becoming more relevant?
Absolutely. I guess a couple of things. I'd love to say that we were a B Corp, Mike, but because of the overwhelming demand, we're still in the queue for evaluation and certification. So just to say that. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about what the B Corp movement represents, and it represents a combination of businesses that are passionate about benefiting people and planet, and those businesses are just realizing that people and planet are fundamental to business resilience. So obviously then as a B Corp, we're thinking about it's part of being a driving and being a part of a sustainable economy. The idea of the B Corp is that it is a movement. It's not a differentiator. It's not niche. It's something that is very much, we want to be mainstream. So then with that kind of mindset as well, we want to be part of a sustainable economy, and therefore, of course, we're looking at clients who are like-minded. We want to help like-minded businesses be better, be more successful. We also want to help businesses who at the very beginning of that journey, help them go on that journey as well. So I think it increasingly is certainly part of our decision making, thinking about is this business that we're looking to work with and is looking to work with us committed to the sustainability agenda, because of course we can't participate in greenwashing that business, and that would be a significant risk for us as a business as well. So certainly that authenticity is something that we talk about with our clients, is we want to help them tell their authentic story, an evidence-based story, make it compelling for their stakeholders with whom they're trying to engage and make things happen in a positively impactful way.
Yeah, Lynn, it's interesting because this is not just a sort of label this around the B Corp movement, because I think what the whole Russian invasion of Ukraine has shown, how many Western businesses were involved in the Russian marketplaces, and many of them were for the best of reasons, some not. They're quite happy to take a dodgy dollar because no one was looking. As soon as somebody looked, they had to scurry off. So who you do business with, I think for everybody, will become more real and relevant. Now, looking at the time, we've got about 5 minutes to sort of wrap things up. And I put two thoughts into the room. One is digital, one is skills. And we can't all answer all of those. So I'm just going to ask a couple of you for a 1 minute view on that. And Dave, if I can come to you first on digital, because you sell a lot of stuff. And I went great at Marks and Spencer trying to track 3 billion items M&S sold every year with a spreadsheet. We've now got AI, we've got big data, we've got remote sensing. What's the potential of digital to help Reckitt manage that very complex value chain?
It's huge. I think if we do not have stronger digital platforms, then our ability to manage, to report all the sort of slightly less exciting stuff is just much harder. And don't get me wrong, Mike, I wish I could say we've thrown away all the spreadsheets and it's all done on database. Chance will be a fine thing. But the necessity of building stronger systems to connect the products, the finance, the consumer, the suppliers is absolutely critical to support all of that reporting. But more importantly, from my point of view, to support planning, better planning, to be more effective, to be more efficient about how you make those changes work. And also to understand what consumers are telling us about our products and to see the connections that may have with issues like climate change. I mean, now in our TCFD report, we talk quite openly about we're seeing changes because of changing weather patterns, access to water and so on and so forth, in terms of the products that people will use. That means we're well informed to change and innovate products so that they better meet the needs, as I was saying earlier, of a low carbon, low water economy. And it's also about how we connect with those people using those products every day. If I take, one of our examples, Finish. Other dishwasher tablets do exist, but Finish is by far and away the best one, he says politely to everybody else. When we designed Finish, we designed it so you could skip the rinse, because that saves you water and that saves energy. You still get just as clean plates. But in doing so, we know that we're helping people make a little bit of difference for themselves. And with higher energy prices, it's also contributing to something slightly better from a household economy point of view. But having spent not an insignificant amount of money designing that new product, it doesn't make a ha'porth of difference until I remember at home to skip the rinse. And so we've been trying to connect with the people who use all of our products day in, day out, to help them to see what they can do differently in small ways that adds up to a massive amount on top of the changes that we make. So our approach is value chain, product innovation, supply chain development, but consumer interaction engagement to make a difference with the products that we provide and persuading them to work differently. And that drives opportunity for us as well. Because I think in the scheme of things, we all know about the science of climate change. What we're not good at yet, or not good enough at yet, I think, Mike, is the science of change and how we all drive that change through our businesses, through our connections, through the networks that we're part of, to create scale, to create pace, and to really inject some urgency into the discussion. I think that's what's necessary. And that, again, is where data and systems give us those insights that reflect in how we then design new products and connect with people around the world.
David, thank you. Now, the other three panelists, I'm going to come to you in a second just for literally 1 minute on how you're working with colleagues across the organisation. But we've had a question in from Stephanie on the chat, and Stephanie said, where do I start? There are thousands of different certification schemes, labels, acronyms. Absolutely right. So where do you start? And I go back very briefly to that why, what, how I spoke about, because all the complexity comes in that middle column of the what, the engine room. What do you commit to do? It's an SBT. What human rights audit system do you use? Do you use this eco label or that one? Breathe. Don't go there first. Go to the why. Why am I doing this? What are my customers saying? What are my colleagues saying? What are my investors saying? My owners? And listen to what people expect of you. Benchmark yourself against the competition and your peer group around you. Just understand where your marketplace is going. And then understand how you're going to bring your colleagues with you. And again, the importance of business case to do that as well. Before you plunge into this rabbit warren, and I stress rabbit warren of acronyms, alphabet soup, which is not helping anybody. But Stephanie, you can always approach me separately, and I'll give you a little bit of thought and view on that. But back to the panel, very, very quickly, literally a minute each, I'm afraid. Emily, then Stephanie, then Lynn. Just how you working with your colleagues to get them to do this?
Hi. I'll go first. So we're working with our colleagues. We have been working with Cambridge University or Institute of Sustainability, CISL, another acronym to add there. So we've been rolling out to all of our client-facing colleagues to ensure that they have a very base level of sustainability understanding, and then when they're having these client conversations, they can have informed discussions, and there are various sort of levels of progression in terms of taking that beyond the basic training. But one thing I just wanted to mention, hopefully with under my minute, is that in some of the ESG financing that we're seeing, we are now seeing training as one of those tend to be 2 to 3 KPI or sustainability targets specifically linked to that client's sustainability financing. That might be training in health and safety, it could be sustainability related, but I think training is rightly getting a huge amount of airtime. And if we look, we've been hearing about the Humber net zero ambitions. We've got a huge opportunity here with the UK's ambitions of wanting to be a powerhouse globally to retrain our fossil fuel engineers and workers in the new green hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, etc. So really exciting, but we've got a lot of work to do. for sure.
Emily, thank you. Stephanie, integration at Wienerberger.
Yeah, sure. So how we bring colleagues with us on the journey. So we've recently become an accredited training centre with IEMA to deliver the environmental sustainability awareness courses, which again, echoing what Emily's saying, will give that basic level of knowledge and understanding of environmental sustainability issues for our staff. And on top of that, the next level up is planning for the transition and making sure that our workforce isn't left behind on that. So where our products and services evolve, so will the skill set and workforce that we need as well, but we don't want our existing workforce to be left behind at the expense of hiring new people to do that for us. So there'll be a training plan developed as well to make sure that we can help our existing workforce into new roles where that's necessary.
Thank you, really appreciate that. And Lynn?
We're multiple tactics, I guess, is the way that we're going, from absolutely training in-house and external training, direct engagement with teams that we know are the key stakeholders on that particular topic, whether or not it be a business travel target or an operationals team. We're creating new teams indeed around things to make sure that they champion kind of like policies and implementation of those policies and measurement, and very much kind of piggybacking existing exercises, systems in the business to influence them. So I think from depending on what the particular challenge or opportunity is, we're kind of looking to go in the best, most impactful way. So quite a broad range of tactics.
That's brilliant. Now look, I wish I had 10 minutes to summarise that. I've got 60 seconds. So let me just say, I think I've heard 3 or 4 really important things. First is business case. If we're going to get millions of companies to shift, they've got to see that this makes sense. So whether it's cost savings, cheaper loans, because your customers want it, because your marketplace is moving, understand those pressures and those opportunities around your business. The second is relevance. I mean, David talked very clearly about a healthcare business looking at climate change through a healthcare lens. Make this relevant for you, not generic. The third thing I think I heard is this hard to abate issue. Don't wait for the signals to come down from your marketplace. Go out and prospect, try and bring your marketplace together to make it easier for you to sell to them. I use the example of Steel Zero. SMEs, again, Emily told us about the power of the Lloyds work and the SME Climate Hub that gives you practical steps as an SME to get started up on this journey. We haven't really touched on the potential of digital and data, but I think David started to show the benefit of that, put digital at the heart of becoming more sustainable. Collaborate. You've got to collaborate. We've heard very obviously about scope 3 collaboration with your value chain, your customers and your suppliers. I think David started to tell us a scope 4 story, how you can start to bring together the communities that you depend upon to galvanise them and get better outcomes by working with them. And we've heard about the power of BCorp as well. This is a movement that's only going to grow in the future. Think about how you can become a BCorp company as well. Without further ado, Claire, over to you for the final word.
Thank you very much, Mike, and all of our panelists. Really interesting discussion today, and I hope everyone has managed to take something from today's discussion. I think, the thing that I would just reiterate is Mike's point about understanding the why. So what is it that you're trying to do? Are you trying to attract talent? Are you trying to attract customers? Are you trying to attract investment? Are you trying to do all of those things? Because that's going to help you to shape and frame your strategy and the approach that's right for you. So thank you again to everybody. Just very quickly before you all sign off, this is the first of 6 series that we're running. So coming up next week, we have 2 events. And so Stefan, to your question, the one on the 14th might be relevant to you. We're going to dig into disclosure for 2022 and beyond. So we're really going to be looking at the evolution and future outlook for corporate and sustainability reporting. So that's next Tuesday. And the third part of the series is words to action. So that's, all the speakers touched on that today, but it's really about embedding sustainability in your culture. What does that mean for you? Is about empowering individuals within the business, is about harnessing the power of your supply chain. So if you haven't signed up for those already, please do. Thank you again to all of our speakers and panelists. Great discussion, and we hope to see you soon.